The sky was the color of wet cement, a solid, dull gray that seemed to press down on the world. A fine cold drizzle fell. Not heavy enough for an umbrella, but enough to soak into your clothes and chill you to the bone. It was a perfect mirror of the man standing alone in the cemetery. He was a man people noticed, even in his grief. His black overcoat was beautifully tailored, worth more than most people earn in a month. But the expensive fabric could not hide the slump of his shoulders or the emptiness in his eyes. His name was Alexander, and he had built an empire from nothing. He could command boardrooms with a single look, but here, before a simple slab of white marble, he felt as small and as lost as a little boy. The headstone read, Eleanor Vance, beloved wife. The dates beneath her name were a brutal short story. 2 years had passed since the illness took her. It was swift and cruel, leaving Alexander with a silence in his life so loud it was deafening. His big house felt like a museum, and his work, once his passion, was now just a series of mechanical tasks. The only time he felt anything real was during these weekly visits. He would stand here, place a single white rose, her favorite, on the grave, and try to remember the sound of her laughter. Today, the rose felt heavier than usual. The rain dripped from his dark hair onto his collar. He closed his eyes trying to picture her face, but the image felt fuzzy at the edges, stolen by time. A sudden movement to his left broke his concentration. He frowned, irritated by the intrusion on his private pain. He looked over. Under the skeletal branches of a large old oak tree, about 20 paces away, were 2 small figures. They were kneeling before a much older, simpler grave, one that looked neglected and forgotten. At first he thought they were just shadows, but as he looked closer, his businessman's eye for detail took in the heartbreaking picture. They were 2 little girls, so identical they had to be twins. They couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old. Their clothes were thin and threadbare, soaked through by the rain. One of them wore a blue jacket that was too small, the sleeves stopping far above her wrists. The other had a pink sweater, matted and frayed. They were huddled together, sharing what little warmth their small bodies could create. Their hair was damp and tangled. They looked like 2 little sparrows fallen from a nest. A part of Alexander, the part that had built walls around his heart, wanted to look away. Their poverty was a stark, uncomfortable stain on the perfect manicured lawn of the cemetery. It was a world he did not understand and did not want to enter. He turned his back to them, forcing his attention back to Eleanor's name, but then the wind carried a whisper. It was a small, thin sound like the rustle of dry leaves. "She looks like the lady in the picture, doesn't she, Rose?" The voice was so innocent, so out of place. Alexander's breath hitched. He slowly turned his head. The girl who had spoken, the one in the tiny blue jacket, was looking towards him. No, not at him. She was looking at Eleanor's headstone. A cold feeling that had nothing to do with the rain trickled down his spine. Who were these children? Why were they looking at his wife's grave? Curiosity, a feeling he had not felt in a long time, began to stir within him. It was mixed with a strange, protective instinct he couldn't explain. He couldn't just leave them here, shivering in the cold. He took a hesitant step towards them. Then another. The crunch of his expensive shoes on the wet gravel alerted them. 4 large, identical eyes, the color of dark honey, snapped towards him. They were wide with fear. The girl in the pink sweater, Rose, immediately shuffled behind her sister, clutching the back of her jacket. Alexander stopped, holding up his hands to show he meant no harm. He felt clumsy and large next to their small, fragile forms. "Hello?" he said, his voice softer than he had used it in years. It was rough from disuse. "It's a cold day to be out." The girls just stared, their faces pale and pinched. The braver one, Lily, lifted her chin a little, a tiny act of defiance. "We're not doing anything wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I know you're not," Alexander said. He gestured towards the old grave they were kneeling at. It was hard to read the worn-out writing. "Is this your family?" Lily glanced at the old headstone, then back at him. She shook her head slowly. "No, we come here sometimes." "It's quiet," Alexander's frown deepened. This made no sense. "Where are your parents? You shouldn't be here alone." The question seemed to make them shrink. Rose peeked out from behind her sister. It was then that Alexander noticed how thin they were, the hollows under their eyes. These were not just children playing. They were children in trouble. His heart, which had felt like a stone in his chest for 2 years, gave a strange, painful squeeze. He knelt down. ignoring the damp earth that immediately stained the knees of his tailored trousers. He wanted to be at their level to seem less threatening. "My name is Alexander," he said gently. "What are your names?" The braver one, Lily, spoke again. "I'm Lily. This is my sister, Rose." "It's very nice to meet you, Lily and Rose," Alexander said. He offered a small, careful smile. "Can you tell me why you are here, really?" The twins exchanged a look, a whole conversation passing between them in silence. It was a connection so deep, it reminded Alexander painfully of the one he had shared with Eleanor. Lily seemed to gather all her courage. She looked from Alexander's face to the white marble of Eleanor's grave and then back again. Her little hand, red from the cold, came up. Her finger, small and shaky, pointed directly at the name Eleanor Vance. Alexander's blood ran cold. The world seemed to slow down. The drizzle, the gray sky, the sound of a distant car, everything faded into a dull hum. Lily took a small, shaky breath and spoke the words that would shatter Alexander's world and put it back together all at once. "We came to see our mother." The words hung in the cold, damp air between them. "We came to see our mother." For a long moment, Alexander could not move. He just knelt there on the wet ground, the cold seeping through his trousers, staring at the two small, serious faces. His mind, usually so sharp and quick, felt like a machine that had jammed. It whirred and clicked, but could not make sense of the data. Their mother, Eleanor, it was impossible. A ridiculous, cruel mistake. He looked from their desperate, hopeful eyes to the elegant headstone of his wife. A wife he had loved more than anything in the world. A wife who had never, in all their years together, mentioned children. The idea was like a crack in the foundation of his entire reality. He opened his mouth to speak, to tell them they were confused, that they had the wrong grave. But the words wouldn't come. The sheer raw need in their faces stopped him. They believed it. With every fiber of their small, shivering beings, they believed that the woman buried here was their mother. The practical part of his brain took over. They were freezing. The drizzle was turning into a steady rain. He couldn't leave them here. He couldn't just drive away. "Okay," he said, his voice strangely hoarse. He cleared his throat. "Okay, you're both very cold. Let's get you somewhere warm and dry. We can talk there." Fear flashed in their eyes again. Rose took a full step back, pressing herself against the rough bark of the old oak tree. Lily protectively moved in front of her sister. "We're not supposed to go with strangers." A sad, small smile touched Alexander's lips. "That is a very good rule. But my name is Alexander. You know that now. So I'm not a complete stranger, am I? And you can see my car right over there. It's big and black. You can remember what it looks like and tell someone if you need to." He was negotiating with two 7-year-olds, and he was using the same calm, logical tone he used in billion-dollar business deals. He pointed to his car, a silent, imposing vehicle waiting on the cemetery's main path. The twins looked at each other again, having another one of their silent conversations. The promise of warmth was a powerful thing. Lily finally gave a tiny, hesitant nod. "All right," she whispered. He stood up, his knees protesting. He didn't reach for their hands, knowing it would scare them. He just started walking slowly towards the car, glancing back to make sure they were following. They trailed behind him like two little ducklings, holding onto each other's hands tightly. The drive to his apartment was completely silent. He sat in the front with his driver, and the two girls were in the back, huddled together. He could see them in the rearview mirror, their eyes wide as they watched the city transform from the quiet, leafy streets near the cemetery to the bustling, glittering heart of the city where his building stood. When the car pulled into the underground garage and they stepped into the private elevator that went straight to the top floor, their awe was palpable. The elevator doors opened directly into his home. The penthouse was vast and stunning, all floor-to-ceiling windows showing a panoramic, if gray, view of the city. But it was also cold. It was decorated in shades of white, gray, and silver. There were no family photos on the walls, no messy, happy signs of life. It was a beautiful, empty shell. A museum of his life after Eleanor. A kind-faced woman in her 50s, the housekeeper, came forward. Her name was Mrs. Lawson. Her eyes widened in surprise when she saw the two soaking wet, shabby little girls standing beside Alexander. "Sir?" she asked, her voice full of question. "Mrs. Lawson." Alexander said, feeling utterly out of his depth. These are Lily and Rose. They need a hot bath, some warm clothes, and a good meal. Please.
Can you help them?
Mrs. Lawson's surprise melted into instant maternal concern. Of course, sir. Right away. Come along, dears. Let's get you out of those wet things. The girls looked up at Alexander, unsure. It's okay, he said, his voice softer than he intended. Mrs. Lawson is very nice. She'll take good care of you. I'll be right here. He watched as Mrs. Lawson led them away, their small bare feet silent on the polished marble floor. He walked over to the large window and stared out, not really seeing the city below. His mind was a storm of confusion and disbelief. About an hour later, the girls emerged, transformed. They were clean. Their hair, now dry, was soft and fell around their shoulders. They were dressed in soft, fluffy robes that were far too big for them, the sleeves rolled up many times. They looked like different children, yet their eyes were the same, watchful, cautious, and deeply tired. Mrs. Lawson had warmed up some soup and made sandwiches. She set a place for them at the large, formal dining table, which was rarely used. The girls ate as if they hadn't eaten in days, their manners quiet but their hunger obvious. Alexander sat at the head of the table, not eating, just watching them. His heart ached seeing how quickly the food disappeared. When they were finished sipping warm milk, he knew he had to ask again. Lily, Rose, he began gently, what you said at the cemetery. Can you tell me more? How can Eleanor be your mother? The girls looked at each other. Lily again was the spokesperson. Our grandma told us, before she got sick. Where is your grandma now? Alexander asked. Rose's lower lip trembled. She went to heaven. A few months ago, so who has been looking after you? Lily looked down at her hands. We lived in a big house with other kids for a while. A shelter. It was loud. We didn't like it. We ran away to find our mom. Alexander felt a lump form in his throat. They had run away from a shelter to find a mother who was buried in the ground. The tragedy of it was almost too much to bear. But your mother... Alexander struggled to find the right words. My wife. She was sick for a while. She couldn't have had... she never told me about you. It was then that Rose, the quieter twin, spoke up. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it filled the silent, spacious room. Grandma said our real mother had to give us away to keep us safe. A long, long time ago. She was very sad to do it. She then reached into the pocket of the robe she was wearing. She pulled out a small, tarnished object and held it out to Alexander on her palm. It was a silver locket, old and scratched on a broken chain. She gave us this, Rose whispered. She said it was from our mother. Alexander's hand trembled slightly as he reached out and took the locket. It was cold and small in his hand. He looked at the two girls, their faces filled with a hope so fragile it could break. He fumbled with the tiny clasp for a moment, his usually steady fingers feeling thick and clumsy. Finally, it clicked open. Inside, protected by a small, cloudy piece of glass, was a photograph. It was faded with age, the colors softened to sepia tones, but the face in the picture was unmistakable. It was Eleanor, a much younger Eleanor, perhaps in her late teens. Her hair was longer, styled differently than he had ever known it. She was smiling a shy, hopeful smile he remembered from their earliest days together. It was a smile he hadn't seen in a very, very long time. He stared at the picture, his breath caught in his chest. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The impossible was suddenly terrifyingly possible. This wasn't a mistake. This was a secret his wife had carried with her to her grave. He looked up from the locket to the two little girls, his wife's eyes staring back at him from both their faces. And in that moment, the last remnants of his old, broken life crumbled away, leaving only a vast and shocking new reality. The rest of the evening passed in a blur for Alexander. The world had become a strange, slow-moving dream. He moved the girls to the softest couch in the living room, wrapping them in warm blankets. He found an old, gentle cartoon for them to watch, more for the noise than anything to fill the heavy silence. They were asleep in minutes, exhaustion finally winning over fear, their heads leaning close together. He stood by the large window, the city lights twinkling below like a field of distant stars. But he saw none of it. All he could see was the face in that locket, the young, hopeful face of the woman he loved, a version of her he had never known. A storm of emotions raged inside him. There was shock, of course, a deep, unsettling confusion, but underneath that something else stirred, a sharp, painful sense of betrayal. Why had she never told him? They had shared everything. Their dreams, their fears, their deepest secrets, or so he had believed. To discover this hidden chapter of her life felt like finding a secret room in a house he thought was his home. He looked over at the sleeping girls. In the soft glow of the television, with their faces relaxed in sleep, he could see it so clearly. The shape of Eleanor's nose on Lily, the way Rose's eyebrows arched just like hers. It was like looking at two tiny living pieces of his lost wife. The anger he felt began to melt, replaced by a crushing sadness. What kind of pain had she carried all those years? What had she gone through? He couldn't do this alone. He needed answers. He needed facts. He walked quietly into his study, a room of dark wood and quiet efficiency. He picked up the phone and called the only person he trusted completely. His personal assistant, an older man named Mr. Alden. Mr. Alden had been with him for 20 years. He was more than an employee. He was a friend, a confidant. He was discreet, sharp, and fiercely loyal. The phone rang only once. "Sir?" Mr. Alden's voice was calm and alert even at this late hour. "Alden," Alexander said, his voice rough. "I need you. At the apartment, now. It's about Eleanor." There was no hesitation. "I am on my way." While he waited, Alexander went back to the living room. He pulled a chair close to the couch and just watched the girls sleep. Their quiet breaths were the only sound. He saw the faint blue veins on their eyelids, the trust in their relaxed little bodies. They had nowhere else to go. They had run to a ghost for safety and had found him instead. The weight of that responsibility settled on his shoulders, heavy but not entirely uncomfortable. Mr. Alden arrived swiftly. He was a man in his late 60s with kind eyes and a serious face. He took in the scene immediately. The billionaire in his rumpled suit, the two unknown children sleeping on the sofa, the cartoons playing silently. His expression did not change, but his eyes showed his surprise. Alexander led him to the study and closed the door. He told him everything. The cemetery, the girls, their words, and finally he handed him the locket. Mr. Alden opened it. He looked at the photograph for a long time, then closed it gently and handed it back. "I see," he said, his voice quiet. "What would you like me to do, sir?" "I need to know the truth, Alden. All of it. I need to know who these children are. I need to know. I need to know who my wife was before I met her." The words felt like a betrayal to say out loud. Mr. Alden nodded. "I will find out. I will be as gentle as possible, but I will be thorough." He left, and the long, lonely night began for Alexander. He couldn't sleep. He paced. He made tea he didn't drink. He sat by the girls, making sure they were still breathing, still safe. The questions circled in his head like vultures. The next day, Mrs. Lawson arrived and helped the girls get dressed in some clothes she had quickly bought for them. They were simple, comfortable things, a world away from their old threadbare clothes. The girls were quiet, still unsure of this new, strange world they were in. Alexander tried to talk to them, to ask about their grandmother, about their life, but they were shy, their answers short. He took the day off work, something he never did. He was too distracted. He just waited. The report came in pieces over the next 48 hours. Mr. Alden would call or stop by, his face growing more and more grave with each update. He laid out the story like a detective solving a cold case. He discovered that Eleanor had grown up in a small town far from the city. Her family had little money. When she was just 17, she had fallen in love with a young man from a wealthier family. It was an intense whirlwind romance, but the boy's family did not approve. When they found out Eleanor was pregnant with twins, they were furious. They saw her as a problem. The boy, scared of his family and the responsibility, gave Eleanor a terrible choice. He told her she had to end the pregnancy. If she refused, he would leave her and she would be alone. But Eleanor was stronger than anyone knew. She refused. She wanted her babies, to protect herself from the pressure and the shame her family was facing, and most of all, to protect her unborn children from a life of struggle and rejection. She made the most difficult decision of her life. She found a way to contact a distant relative, an older, kind-hearted woman who had always been good to her, the girl's grandmother. She arranged for a private, closed adoption, She would have the babies, and the grandmother would raise them as her own. It was the only way she could think of to give them a chance at a stable, loving life. She gave the grandmother the locket with her picture, a piece of her to stay with her daughters. After the girls were born, she left her old life behind. The heartbreak was too much to bear. She moved to the city, changed her life, and eventually, years later, she met Alexander. She buried the pain so deep, building a new, happy life with him, that she never felt she could dig it up. The secret became a part of her, a silent sorrow she carried alone. The grandmother had raised the girls with love, but she had been sick for a long time. When she passed away, there was no money, no plan. The system took the girls. The shelter was overcrowded and scary. Remembering the stories their grandmother told them about their beautiful mother, and having the locket as their only clue, they decided to find her. They remembered their grandmother mentioning the cemetery where their grandfather was buried. They went there hoping to find a clue, and by a miracle, or perhaps fate, they saw Eleanor's name on a headstone. The picture on the locket matched the beautiful, kind face carved in the stone. When Mr. Alden finished speaking, the study was silent. Alexander sat in his chair, his head in his hands. The anger was gone completely now, washed away by a wave of immense grief. Not for himself, but for Eleanor. He pictured her as a scared, brave teenager, giving up her children to save them. He imagined the weight of that secret she carried all through their happy marriage. Every time she saw a child in the park, every Mother's Day, a little piece of her must have broken inside. He wasn't angry. He was heartbroken for her. And he was filled with a new, powerful purpose. These two little girls in the next room were not a mistake or a problem. They were the last, most precious gift Eleanor could ever have given him. They were a piece of her returned to him. They were a chance to mend a broken circle. They were a reason to live again, to fill the empty, silent rooms of his life with noise and laughter and love. He knew what he had to do. The truth settled over Alexander, not like a storm, but like a quiet, gentle rain. It washed away the last of his confusion and hurt, leaving behind something clean and new. He wasn't angry at Eleanor anymore. How could he be? He finally understood the deep hidden sadness he had sometimes seen in her eyes, a shadow he could never quite name. She had carried this immense sacrifice inside her, a secret love for two daughters she believed were better off without her. He looked around his study, a room built for making big decisions about money and power. But the most important decision of his life was being made right now, and it had nothing to do with any of that. It was about the two girls sleeping on the other side of the door. He stood up and walked out of the study. The penthouse was quiet. Mrs. Lawson had gone home for the evening, and the girls were tucked into the large guest bed, surrounded by pillows. He stood in the doorway watching them. In the soft glow of a nightlight, they looked so small and peaceful. Lily had one hand tucked under her cheek. Rose was curled on her side, her breathing slow and even. These were Eleanor's daughters. Their daughters, a feeling strong and clear, rose up in his chest. It was a feeling he hadn't felt in 2 years, purpose. A real human purpose, not just the empty routine of running his company. He needed to be their father. He needed to give them the safe, happy life their mother had dreamed of for them. He needed to honor Eleanor's memory, not by visiting a cold stone, but by warming this cold house with the family she had given him. The next morning, he woke up before the sun. He was nervous, like a young man about to give a very important speech. He asked Mrs. Lawson to make a special breakfast. Pancakes with berries, something he thought children would like. The smell of sugar and warm batter began to fill the air. When the girls came out, dressed in their new, clean clothes, they looked shy. They sat at the big dining table, their feet dangling high above the floor. They ate their pancakes quietly, stealing little glances at him. After breakfast, he asked them to sit with him in the living room. The morning sun was streaming through the huge windows, painting everything in gold. He sat on the large rug with them so he wouldn't seem so tall and far away. "Lily Rose," he began, his voice gentle. "I learned some things about your mother, my Eleanor." Their big, honey-colored eyes fixed on him, full of attention and a little bit of fear. He told them the story. He didn't use complicated words. He painted a picture of a young, brave girl who loved her 2 babies more than anything in the world. He explained how she wanted to protect them and give them the best chance, so she made the incredibly hard choice to let their kind grandmother raise them. She was never happy about it, Alexander said, his own eyes growing wet. It was the saddest thing she ever had to do. She carried that sadness with her always. She would have been so proud of you both. So proud of the strong, brave girls you have become. He saw tears well up in Rose's eyes. Lily sniffled, trying to be strong, but a single tear escaped and rolled down her cheek. She loved us? Lily whispered, her voice cracking. Oh, yes, Alexander said, his voice firm with certainty. She loved you more than you can ever imagine. She never, ever forgot you. It was as if a huge weight lifted from the room. The girls' small bodies seemed to relax all at once. The secret was out. The truth was not scary. It was sad, but it was also full of love. Alexander took a deep breath. This was the moment. This is a very big house, he said, looking around, and it's been very quiet. Too quiet. It's just been me here for a long time. He looked from one twin to the other, making sure he had their full attention. I was thinking, would you like to stay here with me? Not just for a little while, but to live here. This could be your home. For a long moment, there was only silence. The two girls looked at each other. Their silent conversation was longer this time, filled with wonder and disbelief. Then, they both turned back to him. Lily, always the first to speak, asked the question that was in both their minds. You mean, like a family? Alexander's heart felt so full he thought it might burst. He nodded, a real, genuine smile spreading across his face for the first time in years. Yes, exactly like a family. Rose, who was usually so quiet, suddenly scrambled forward on her knees and wrapped her small, thin arms around his neck in a tight hug. A moment later, Lily joined her, burying her face in his shoulder. He held them, these two little miracles. He could feel their small hearts beating against him. He closed his eyes and breathed in the scent of their clean hair. In that moment, the last of the ice around his own heart melted away, replaced by a warmth he thought was lost forever. That very day, he got to work. He called Mr. Alden, not with a question but with a mission. Alden, he said, his voice filled with a new energy. We have a new priority. The most important one. I need to become Lily and Rose's legal father. I want to adopt them. Please start the process, whatever it takes. He also called the best interior designer in the city. The cold, gray guest room was transformed. The walls were painted a soft, warm yellow. 2 beautiful beds with fluffy white comforters replaced the large one. A bookshelf was filled with stories, and a big, soft rug was laid on the floor for playing. He wasn't just preparing a room. He was building a home. He was building a future. That night, as he tucked them into their new beds for the first time, Lily looked up at him, her eyes heavy with sleep. Good night, she whispered. He smiled down at her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. Good night, Lily. From the other bed, a small, sleepy voice added, Good night, Papa. The word hung in the air, soft and perfect. It was a title he had never dreamed of having. It felt more important than any other title he had ever earned. Good night, Rose, he whispered back, his voice thick with emotion. He turned off the light and stood in the hallway, listening to the quiet sounds of the house that was no longer silent. He knew the road ahead would have challenges. There would be legal papers and adjustments and difficult days. But for the first time since Eleanor left, Alexander felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. He was no longer just a billionaire. He was a father. The seasons turned, as they always do. The cold gray drizzle of that fateful day in the cemetery was replaced by the warm, golden sunshine of a late spring morning. A whole year had passed. The quiet, empty penthouse was quiet no more. Now the sounds of life filled every corner. The pitter-patter of small running feet echoed on the polished floors. The hallway walls were decorated not with expensive art, but with colorful drawings of stick-figure families and bright, smiling suns. The smell of Mrs. Lawson's cookies often drifted from the kitchen, and the large, formal dining table was now frequently scattered with crayons and schoolbooks. Alexander stood in the heart of this happy noise. A man transformed. The hollow look in his eyes was gone, replaced by a calm, steady warmth. He was helping Rose tie the laces of her little white shoes, a task he had proudly mastered. Lily was already ready, carefully holding 2 small bouquets of flowers, one of Lily's and one of Rose's. Are we ready to go see Mama? Alexander asked, his voice soft. The girls nodded, their faces serious but not sad. This was a different kind of visit now. The drive to the cemetery was nothing like the one a year before. The car was filled with the soft sound of the girls chatting about their school friends and a song they had learned. Alexander listened, his heart feeling full and light at the same time. When they arrived, the place felt different too. The sun filtered through the fresh green leaves of the old oak tree, creating dancing patterns of light on the grass. It felt peaceful, not sad. They walked together, the three of them hand in hand. Alexander held Lily's hand on his right and Rose's on his left. They stopped before Eleanor's grave. The white marble was clean and shone in the sun. But something was different about it. The inscription had changed. It now read, Eleanor Vance, beloved wife and mother. Alexander looked at the new word, mother, and a deep sense of rightness settled over him. This was the truth, finally carved in stone for the whole world to see. Lily stepped forward first. She placed her bouquet of lilies gently at the base of the headstone. Hello, Mama, she said, her voice clear and sweet. I got the best grade on my spelling test. Papa hung it on the refrigerator. Then it was Rose's turn. She placed her bouquet of roses next to her sister's. We told her about the school play, Papa, Rose said, looking back at Alexander. I'm going to be a butterfly. Alexander smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. She would have loved to see that, he said. She would have been the proudest mother in the whole audience. He knelt down between his daughters, putting an arm around each of them. They stood there for a few quiet minutes, not weighed down by grief, but lifted by a feeling of connection. They were sharing their lives with her. They were telling her that her daughters were safe and loved and happy. The secret that had been a burden was now a bond that held the three of them together. After a while, Lily looked up at him. Papa, can we go to the park after this? The one with the big ice cream cones? Alexander laughed, a warm, easy sound. I think that's a wonderful idea. As they turned to leave, the sun broke through the branches of the oak tree, casting a single, bright beam of light directly onto Eleanor's headstone, illuminating the flowers and the word mother. It felt like a blessing. Alexander didn't look back with sadness. He looked forward at his two daughters walking ahead of him, their small hands linked together. They were his purpose now. They were his joy. He had gone to the cemetery a year ago, a broken man visiting a memory. He was leaving now, a whole man, guiding his future. The empty space in his heart hadn't just been patched up. It had been filled to overflowing with a love he never knew was missing. The circle of love that Eleanor had started long ago, with her brave and difficult choice, was now complete. Their family was forged not just by blood, but by choice, by forgiveness, and by a love strong enough to bridge even the gap between life and death. He caught up to his girls, and each of them slipped a hand back into his. Together, the three of them walked out of the quiet of the past and into the bright, noisy, beautiful promise of their future.